Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving into some seriously practical advice today. Stuff to help you become like your best business selves. Whether you're already killing it in sales or just starting out as an entrepreneur, this deep dive is packed with actionable insights that you can use. And we got to give a huge shout out to Teacher Ricky for inspiring this episode. You're the best, Teacher Ricky. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep the deep dives coming.
Thanks, Teacher Ricky. Yeah, we're excited to unpack this one.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into it. I think we're about to challenge some classic sales wisdom, particularly all those always be closing techniques. I have to admit I'm a little skeptical. Isn't closing the most crucial part of the sale?
That's what we're often told, right? But the book Spin Selling actually argues that these traditional closing techniques, they can actually be detrimental, especially in more complex sales.
Okay, now that's surprising. Why would closing techniques backfire those situations?
Well, think about it this way. Think about the difference between buying a coffee and then investing in some complex enterprise software system for your entire company. I mean, those are vastly different sales scenarios, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And the research in spin selling, which, by the way, analyzed over 35,000 sales transactions, they found that in these larger sales, customers are making much more considered decisions with longer cycles.
Oh.
They involve way more stakeholders. And there's potentially higher risks too. So traditional closing tactics, which really rely on pressure, can create a lot of resistance and actually push customers away.
That makes a lot of sense. So if those high pressure tactics are out, what does S-Pin selling suggest instead?
Well, they introduced this model called S-Pin selling, which focuses on asking the right questions to guide the customer to recognize the value of your solution. So it's about uncovering and developing their needs, not just pushing your product on them.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kinds of questions are we talking about here?
Well, there are 4 types of SPI questions. There's situation, problem, implication, and need payoff. Let's start with situation questions. Those gather basic information about the customer's current situation.
All right, so those are pretty straightforward, but if we're trying to avoid that whole interrogation vibe, how quickly do we move on from those?
Exactly. Too many situation questions and you're just boring the customer. That's where problem questions come in. These dig deeper into the customer's challenges and pain points. We're shifting the focus away from simply listing product features.
So instead of saying something like, our software has this amazing feature, you'd ask something like, what are some of the biggest roadblocks you're facing in your current workflow?
Right. And this is where it gets interesting. Once you've uncovered a problem, you use implication questions. And these help the customer understand the potential consequences of not addressing that problem.
I see. So it's about making them aware of the bigger picture impact. Could you give me an example?
Sure, let's say a customer mentions that they struggle with data entry backlogs. An implication question could be, how are these backlogs impacting your team's productivity and your ability to meet deadlines? And suddenly, what seemed like a minor inconvenience becomes a much bigger issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do need-payoff questions fit into all of this?
Need-payoff questions are the magic touch. They encourage the customer to articulate the benefits of solving the problem in their own words. Essentially, you're guiding them to sell themselves on the value of your solution.
Interesting. So it's about getting them to connect the dots between the solution and their desired outcomes.
Precisely. For instance, you might ask, if we could help you eliminate those data entry backlogs and free up 20% of your team's time, what impact would that have on your overall efficiency and profitability?
Now they're not just passively listening. They're actively envisioning the positive results and how it directly benefits their goals.
And that's the power of spin selling. It's less about pushing a product
Yeah.
and more about guiding the customer to discover the value for themselves.
That's a really interesting shift in perspective. But what about the role of features? Are you saying that features don't matter at all in this approach?
No features definitely matter, but they're not the star of the show. It's about how those features translate into tangible benefits for the customer. And spin selling makes this critical distinction between advantages and benefits.
Okay, I'm curious to learn more about that. What's the difference between an advantage and a benefit?
So an advantage simply explains how a product can be used. A benefit, on the other hand, demonstrates how that product directly fulfills an explicitly stated customer need. The book uses this word processor sales call as an example.
Oh, do tell.
So the salesperson initially focuses on advantages. They're saying things like, our word processor has full screen editing and error correction. Sounds impressive, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't really address the customer-specific needs.
I see. Those features might be great, but how do they actually solve my problems?
Right. But then the salesperson shifts to benefits by saying, since you mentioned needing to reduce errors in your documents, our word processor can help you achieve that by decreasing error rates by more than 20%. Now the customer sees how that feature directly addresses their need and provides tangible value.
That's a much more compelling approach. It's not just about features. It's about how those features translate into real-world solutions for the customer.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond simply listing potential advantages and focusing on articulating those advantages and concrete benefits, benefits that resonate with the customer's explicit needs.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this benefits over advantages mindset could be a game changer. I'm also curious about how this approach plays out in handling objections. Do you have any insights on that?
That's a great question, and spin selling offers a fascinating perspective on objections. They're often a symptom of underdeveloped needs.
Okay, tell me more about that. How does this idea of underdeveloped needs connect to objections?
Well, it's like offering solutions before the problem's true impact has been fully grasped. Remember that word processor example. When the salesperson initially focused on the advantages, the customer immediately objected, saying, it's not worth the hassle just to fix a few typos.
Yeah, because the value hadn't been established yet.
Exactly. They were offering solutions before the customer fully understood the problem and its potential consequences. But if they had used implication and need-payoff questions to build up the need, the objection might have never come up.
So instead of jumping in with the solution, they should have asked questions like, what are the consequences of these errors in your documents? Or, if you could reduce these errors, how would that impact your team's efficiency and your company's reputation?
Precisely. By guiding the customer to recognize the problem's implications and the benefits of solving it, you're creating a much stronger foundation for your solution.
Yeah, it's like laying the groundwork before you start building. It makes the whole process much smoother and more effective.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of making the process smoother, spine selling also offers some valuable advice on how to obtain commitment from customers without resorting to those high-pressure closing techniques.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the secret to getting that commitment without being pushy?
Well, the book suggests that the simplest approach is often the most effective. Suggest an appropriate next step to the customer instead of using those aggressive closing lines.
So instead of saying, are you ready to sign the contract today? You might say, based on our conversation, it seems like the next logical step would be to schedule a demo for your team. Would next Tuesday at 10:00 a.m. work for you?
Exactly. It's about guiding the customer through the process in a natural, collaborative way. You're offering a clear path forward that feels comfortable and logical, rather than forcing a decision.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about building a partnership and working together toward a solution. But I have to admit, as much as I love these SPN techniques, I'm a little intimidated by the idea of putting them into practice. Any advice for those of us who are eager to try this out but maybe feeling a little nervous?
Absolutely. Spun Selling offers 4 golden rules for learning new sales skills. That can help you ease into this new approach and make the transition smoother.
Okay, I'm ready for those golden rules. Hit me with rule number 1.
Rule number 1 is focus on one behavior at a time. Don't try to overhaul your entire sales approach all at once. Instead, pick one specific behavior, like asking implication questions, and make that your focus for a week or 2.
That's a good reminder. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you're trying to change too many things at once. It's much more effective to focus on mastering one skill before moving on to the next.
Exactly. And that leads us to rule number 2. Try the new behavior at least 3 times. Anything new will feel a little awkward and uncomfortable at first. Don't give up after one try just because it didn't feel perfect.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. Remember when I first started this podcast, I was so nervous and self-conscious, but I kept practicing, and now it feels much more natural.
And you're doing an amazing job. See, persistence pays off.
Thanks. It's definitely about giving yourself permission to be a beginner and to keep practicing even when it feels a little uncomfortable. So what's golden rule number 3?
Rule number 3 is prioritize quantity over quality in the beginning. When you're learning a new skill, don't get too hung up on perfection. Just focus on using the new behavior as often as possible.
So it's about getting those reps in. The more you use the new technique, the more comfortable and natural it will become.
Exactly. It's about building that muscle memory. The more you repeat the behavior, the easier it will get.
This is all so helpful. But what about those high-stakes sales calls? Should we really be experimenting with new techniques when there's so much on the line?
That's a great point. And that's where golden rule number 4 comes in. Practice in safe situations. Don't try out your new spin and selling skills on your most important clients right away.
Yeah, that's like learning to drive a car. You wouldn't want to practice on the freeway during rush hour.
Exactly. Start with smaller accounts-friendly customers, or even practice with colleagues or friends. Get comfortable with the techniques in a low-pressure environment before you bring them to those high-stakes situations.
That makes perfect sense. It's about creating a safe space to learn and experiment without the fear of making a mistake.
Right. Remember, mastering any new skill takes time and patience. Be kind to yourself, celebrate those small wins, and focus on continuous improvement.
Okay, so we've covered the SBHAN questions and how to use them effectively. We've talked about the importance of focusing on benefits, and we've explored some great tips for preventing and handling objections. I'm curious, does the book address the beginning of the sales call? Those first few minutes can really set the tone for the entire conversation.
You're absolutely right. Those first impressions are crucial. And selling actually challenges some of the conventional wisdom about how to open a sales call.
Oh, do tell. I thought building rapport was key to creating that initial connection.
Well, it is. But in larger sales, buyers are often pressed for time and laser focused on solving specific business problems. They might see those personal questions as irrelevant or even intrusive.
So instead of trying to force a personal connection, it's better to focus on understanding their business needs and demonstrate that you're there to help them achieve their goals.
Precisely. It's about being respectful of their time and priorities. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be personable or friendly, but keep the focus on the business at hand.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm also curious about the use of opening benefit statements. Like, if I could save you thousands of dollars, you'd give me 5 minutes of your time, right? What's the book's take on that approach?
Aspen selling cautions against using those generic opening benefit statements, especially in larger sales.
Really? But those statements are supposed to pique their interest
Yeah.
and make them want to hear more.
Well, that's the idea, but they often come across as insincere or manipulative. It's like you're trying to trick them into listening to your pitch.
Yeah, and it assumes you already know their needs before you've even had a chance to ask them any questions.
Exactly. So instead of starting with a canned benefit statement, the book recommends focusing on asking questions to uncover the customer's needs and then tailor your solution to those specific needs.
So it's back to that idea of letting the customer lead the way and demonstrating that you're there to listen and understand their unique challenges. This is all so insightful. I'm starting to see how this approach could completely transform my sales conversations.
It's definitely a powerful framework, but of course we always want to be discerning about the advice we're taking in. What makes you confident that these SPN techniques actually work? That's where the research comes in. SPN selling goes into great detail about the extensive research that backs up these findings.
Okay, I'm definitely interested in hearing more about that. What were some of the key aspects of the research?
Well, for one, it's based on a massive data set. They analyzed over 35,000 sales calls over a period of 12 years. It's one of the largest research projects ever conducted in the field of sales.
Wow, that's impressive. Feels like they were really committed to testing these techniques thoroughly.
Absolutely. And they didn't just passively observe salespeople, they measured their performance and tracked their results.
So were they able to see a clear connection between using spin techniques and closing more deals?
Yes. They found a direct correlation. They even conducted controlled experiments where some salespeople were trained in spin selling, while others weren't.
And what did those experiments reveal?
The salespeople trained in spin selling consistently outperformed their counterparts. Some even saw sales increases of up to 17%.
Wow, that's a significant improvement. Sounds like we have strong evidence that these techniques can make a real difference.
Exactly. And the book provides specific examples of how these techniques have been successfully implemented across various industries, from technology to finance to healthcare.
So it's not just theoretical, it's been proven in practice. That's reassuring. Now, before we wrap up, I'm curious about the presentation phase of the sales process. After all that investigating and questioning, how do we present our solutions in a way that truly resonates with the customer?
That's a crucial point. Spin selling advises against jumping into a detailed product demonstration too early. Instead, use the insights gathered during the investigating stage to tailor your presentation to the customer's specific needs and interests.
So rather than like a generic overview, we're highlighting the features and benefits that are most relevant to their situation.
Exactly. It's about demonstrating how your solution directly addresses their pain points and it helps them achieve their desired outcomes.
Yeah, it's like going to the doctor. You wouldn't want them to give you a general lecture on every possible medical condition. You want them to focus on your specific symptoms.
That's a great analogy. And when you customize your presentation in this way, you're showing the customer that you've been listening, that you understand their challenges, and that you're genuinely invested in finding a solution that works for them.
It's about building that trust and credibility.
Precisely. And once that foundation is in place, you can then seamlessly demonstrate how your solution can make a real difference in their world.
This is all so incredibly valuable. I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new perspective on sales.
And remember, the key is to keep practicing and refining these techniques. The more you use them, the more natural and effective they'll become.
It's a journey, not a destination. Speaking of journeys, this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of spin selling. I'm so grateful for your insights.
It's been my pleasure.
And of course, another huge shout out to Teacher Ricky for suggesting this fantastic book. Teacher Ricky, you're the real MVP.
Couldn't have done it without you, Teacher Ricky.
And to all our listeners, if you're looking to level up your sales game, we highly recommend checking out Spin Selling. It's a real game changer. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know what other books or topics you'd like us to explore. We're always looking for new deep dives.
Absolutely. Let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep into the world of knowledge.
See you soon.